I feel like a lot of people get into fish keeping because they went to Petco or PetSmart, they saw the fish and they were like, ooh, they're cheap and easy, this will be fun. And then you take them home and they start dying. Hi, my name is Irene with Girl Talks Fish, and I want to talk about my experiences with 10 beginner-friendly fish from Petco. Are they worth it or not? Now, the first fish I brought home, which probably many of you did as well, would be a betta fish. And yes, they are pretty bulletproof. I've seen friends keep them in wine glasses, in pothos vases, and they didn't even feed them anything. Obviously, I do not recommend that. If you want to see my playlist on proper betta fish care, it's right over here. But that being said, I do think they are still a great first fish for many people, just because they are so forgiving of the many, many mistakes that you will make, that we all make when we first start the hobby. Now, after getting introduced to the gateway drug of betta fish, of course, I wanted to start my first community tank. So my first ever community fish would be albino Cory catfish, or Corydoras. And they are very hardy. I love their derpy and happy-go-lucky kind of personality. And plus they have a very lovely, naturally pink tint to their scales. And they are mostly bottom dwellers, meaning they're gonna constantly be scavenging for leftover food along the bottom of the tank. Obviously, feed them, don't just use them as a cleanup crew. But this was actually my first accidental breeding project as well. As long as you feed them lots of foods like Repashy gel food or frozen bloodworms, they're gonna start producing eggs, which is really fun. So if you wanna learn how to raise them, I have a whole video over here on how to do that. Great fish. The next community fish I got was, well, I was looking for something kind of swimming around the middle of the tank. So a classic schooling fish would be neon tetras. I didn't have any health problems with them, and they're pretty cheap, which is good because you're gonna need at least like 6 or more so that they'll feel comfortable coming out. Now, for me, I would say they didn't swim in the middle per se, more like the bottom half of the tank. So that's one thing to expect. And then I don't have a lot to say about them. They don't have a lot of personality, but they do have that brilliant blue and red coloration. I probably should have just gotten more of them so they would have a greater impact on my aquarium. Now let's talk about my first invertebrate on the list, a monoshrimp. Yes, they're not like the prettiest because they're clear, but I absolutely love these things. They just have shrimp in general, just have very interesting behaviors, like the way they eat and the way they crawl around and stuff. They're great algae eaters. And then unlike some of the other dwarf shrimp, like cherry shrimp, that can't be kept with a lot of tank mates, a monoshrimp are like slightly bigger, faster, and definitely bolder. Like I've definitely seen them come and snatch food out of other fish's mouths. They are very hungry and they don't care. One thing to be aware of though is that they are escape artists. So make sure to cover any cracks, anything that might allow them to escape, because I've definitely found dried up pink bodies underneath my bed and the kitchen sink, etc. So something to be aware of. Another great addition for a community tank would be a honey gourami. I think they would make a really good centerpiece just because they're so peaceful, for a gourami at least, and they're very bright yellow. They can be a little bit shy if bullied, so just make sure there's no other tank mates that are bullying them and they will really, really shine. The honey gourami is also the first fish that I ever bred that was a bubble nester. Like they make little bubbles and put their eggs in there. Very, very cool. If you ever want to experiment with that, I've got a breeding video about them over here. Speaking of gouramis, let's talk about the dwarf gourami. This thing, I don't know why people keep labeling it as a community fish. It seriously needs to come with a warning. Similar to a betta fish, it really depends on personality. So you're either gonna get, something chilled and laid back, or Tasmanian devil. So let's talk about my experiences. Kai was my first flame dwarf gourami, and he was pretty cool, didn't bother anybody. But then when I tried again with Peyton Manning, also a flame dwarf gourami, he was like the devil with fins. I mean, he would just non-stop chase my poor albino Corys who never hurt a fly. He would not let them swim around freely, so he gots to go. Then my third one is this powder blue dwarf gourami Unicron, and he's not really a bully so much as like a food hog. So during dinner time, he will chase away all the other fish. I've tried to get pretty creative about spreading the food around and trying to put it in different corners of the tank, but as you can see, he is kind of overweight, so a work in progress. Balloon mollies are another beginner fish that I feel like should come with a warning, so hear me out. The first ones I got, they had columnaris, very deadly disease, ended up wiping out nearly everything in my aquariums. I ended up quitting the hobby for a while. It was so devastating to me. The second set of balloon mollies I got came with fungus. Like, what gives? Why are they so sickly? Well, it turns out I found out that a lot of live bears, especially like fancy mollies, when they are bred overseas, they raise them up in brackish water, like part fresh, part salt water. And so when they come into our freshwater tanks, they need very hard water, high mineral content. Guess who happens to have very soft water? That's why I was having all the problems. So once I figured that out, I just need to add a lot of Seachem Equilibrium minerals, and then they do a lot better. Plus, I will, once they're young are born, I will raise them up in my normal freshwater, tap water, the softer kind, and then they're a lot hardier than the parents, which is great. Other pros about them are they are good algae eaters, who knew? And then just be aware that they are voracious eaters. Like Unicron, they are food hogs, so I would pair them with other fish that are also fast eaters so that they won't get left out. Now let's talk about the little jewels of the nano aquarium world, cherry shrimp. I personally got mine from a local hobbyist, but I've definitely started seeing them at stores like Petco and PetSmart, so let's talk about them. Basically, they are very, very beautiful, come in all sorts of Skittle-like colors. However, they are small and therefore easily eaten, especially the babies. Now, if you only care about keeping adult shrimp and not necessarily breeding, then there are like small, peaceful nanofish that you can keep them with, such as chili resporas or pygmy corridors. They'll be fine. However, I highly recommend setting up a species-only breeding tank for them, and it's amazing. Like, you drop a piece of food in there and they just swarm on them like zombies. It's so cool. And because they're in such high demand, your local fish store will be happy to pay you for selling off your extra shrimp to them. So if you want to know how to get started, I've got a video about it over here. Endler's live bears are another fish that I technically didn't get from a pet store. I got it from my local fish store, but they're definitely sold at Petco and PetSmart. I personally like them better than guppies just because they seem a little less inbred and therefore more hardy. They are smaller, fast, they're still very, very colorful. And like balloon mollies, they breed very easily, and you're gonna wanna have higher mineral content in your water. Just one thing to note is, at least the ones that I got, they happen to come with internal parasites, a form of live bear's disease. So all I had to do was, well, once I figured out what it was treat them with dewormers like Paraclins and Expel P, and then make sure to do a couple rounds of treatment just because you want to make sure all the eggs have hatched, and then you're able to kill off any that are born after that. You're gonna laugh at me because when it comes to snails, I've always been team kill it with fire, but I have absolutely fallen in love with mystery snails. Hear me out. They are just so, very fast, very active, at least for a snail, constantly scavenging and cleaning up things in the tank, come in lots of colors like yellow and purple. And then kind of like how the shrimp have lots of interesting non-fish-like behaviors, the snail, like constantly staring at it because it will climb up all the way to the top of the tank and then parachute down for no reason. I've caught it like sitting there and extending its breathing siphon. I'm like, what is that? What is going on? I'm so glad I decided to try out this beginner animal, I guess, because the whole family loves to stare at this tank and just find like, where's Sunstreaker? What kind of crazy stuff is he getting up to now? If you like the idea of having a centerpiece fish or animal that everybody stops to stare at when they look at your aquarium, check out my top 5 list over here. Take time to enjoy your aquariums, and I'll see you in the next video.